RT is sitting down with a man who has been a cause of much controversy here in the U.S. over the last years, Kevin Barrett, member of SPINE, Scientific Professionals Investigating 9/11. Kevin, thank you very much for sitting down with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Anastasia.
First off, can you summarize for us your take on what happened on September 11th?
Well, it was clearly a false flag operation. 19 Muslim so-called hijackers and Osama bin Laden, a guy on dialysis in a cave in Afghanistan, were blamed for it. But let's face it, those guys didn't have the kind of access that would have allowed them to take down the World Trade Center in a controlled demolition using ultra high-tech nanothermite explosives. So this was a false flag operation designed to demonize Arabs and Muslims and to launch pre-planned wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and possibly elsewhere.
What about evidence?
The evidence is overwhelming. People who aren't familiar with it should start by Googling WTC-7. The controlled demolition of Building 7 at about 5:20 in the afternoon on 9/11 is the smoking gun of 9/11. This 47-story, robust, super strong high-rise was taken down straight into its footprint at free fall speed, and there was a countdown to demolition that went out over police radio. There was vaporized and melted steel found. The New York Times reported that the steel from the beams in Building 7 had been vaporized. There's the owner, Larry Silverstein, who bought the World Trade Center 3 months before 9/11, immediately doubled the insurance and has walked off with what looks like nearly $20 billion profit on his $20 million investment in the World Trade Center, confessed to the controlled demolition of Building 7 on national television, on a PBS special. So people should investigate Building 7. Once you look into Building 7, you'll see that the official story of what happened on 9/11 is false.
Who gathered this evidence?
Well, evidence has been gathered by all sorts of researchers as well as journalists. One of the main tasks in 9/11 research is just collating the numerous mainstream media stories on this that contradict each other and contradict the official story. It's utterly ridiculous.
Would you claim it was an inside job?
Of course.
Explain why.
If Dick Cheney, the Vice President of the United States, was in the presidential command bunker acting as commander-in-chief that day, there was an unconstitutional transfer from Bush to Cheney of the power of commander-in-chief, and Cheney was in that bunker before 9:15 in the morning, and yet the 9/11 Commission covered that up and lied very obviously, trying to claim that he didn't even get there until after 10 a.m. That and all sorts of other evidence, including Cheney ordering an apparent stand down, ordering the Air Force not to interfere with whatever it was that was coming at the Pentagon, show us that Dick Cheney was almost certainly involved in the 9/11 attack. If the Vice President of the United States is involved in this attack, I think we can call it an inside job.
Well, if you say that the facts show that it was an inside job, why do you think the majority of Americans doesn't support that opinion?
Well, it may be the majority, but it's not really an overwhelming majority. A Scripps poll a couple of years ago showed that 36% of the American people believe that it's likely that 9/11 was an inside job designed to launch wars in the Middle East. So that leaves us with, what, 64% that don't think that? And yet other polls have showed that as many as 80% say that there's something fishy about the official story. So it's really a much debated issue. It's not the kind of unanimous acceptance of the official story that the mainstream media would like you to believe. But why haven't the American people figured this out unanimously? Why haven't we managed to change the history books and get the mainstream media to report it right? I think the answer is that 9/11 was a psychological warfare operation. It's an example of trauma-based mind control. This is a kind of mind control developed by the CIA and other intelligence agencies that inflicts massive trauma on people and uses that trauma to essentially control their psyche. And 9/11 traumatized the American people so badly that most people just don't want to go there. It takes a certain kind of courage and a fearless desire for truth.
There was a point where you received death threats for what you were saying. What does that tell you?
I did have Bill O'Reilly go on his show and say that I should be taken out in a mob hit and thrown into the river and be found floating in Boston Harbor. And then I've also had lots of email death threats from lesser individuals. And I guess that shows that 9/11 truth is a very sensitive area. People you know, it's kind of the official story is a religion. It's a sacred myth. And in any culture, the people who question a sacred myth are usually burned as heretics. I think it's wonderful, though, that the sacred myth of 9/11 has been questioned so much that it's no longer that heretical to do so. I can still be alive after 3 years of questioning this myth full time. And when you talk to ordinary Americans in the street, they're not really believing in it as if it were a genuine sacred myth anymore. It's more of a legend, which folklorists say is a tale or a story that people argue about. They don't know whether to believe it or not.
Let's talk about accountability. Do you think someone needs to be held accountable for what happened?
Absolutely. The family members of the people who died on 9/11, the first responders, the survivors, these people are demanding accountability. They want to know why their loved ones died, and that's why they're supporting the New York City ballot initiative. We don't just need transparency, we also need justice and closure. And for the many people in New York who suffered, and people all around the world who suffered from 9/11, need the truth in order to achieve closure.
Let me follow up on that. You mentioned groups that are calling for a new, unbiased investigation to start things over and look into events from the beginning. Do you think that's possible with all the versions out there at this point?
Sure. I think the first real investigation that is run by people of integrity and has subpoena power will break the case. It will get to the truth. The reason is that so much evidence is already accumulated. The work has been done. It just takes the political will to take this evidence and use it in court to prosecute the guilty and establish the truth.
There was a point where you called America's war on terror phony. Why would you do that? That's a big part of America's foreign policy for several years.
Well, you know, even people who haven't figured out that 9/11 was an inside job should easily understand that this war on terror is phony. After checking out the statistics, I discovered that you are 30 times more likely to die from lightning than terrorism. You are 10 times more likely to drown in your bathtub than to die in a terrorist attack, if you're in the U.S. Clearly, terrorism is not even remotely a threat. Yes, we had these buildings blown up by whoever it was that blew them up with nanothermite explosives on 9/11, but even adding up all those deaths, statistically, you still have terrorism being a non-factor. Why, then, is the media telling us that we should be afraid of terrorists everywhere we go? We have to look over our shoulder, and when you're on the subway, watch out for packages and all of this nonsense. When you're in the airport, the threat level has just been raised to orange. Watch out, don't try to bring any toothpaste on board. Those Muslims are going to blow up the plane with toothpaste and peroxide. It's utterly and completely ridiculous. It's a fraud. And whether or not you think that 9/11 was an inside job, if you sit down for 10 seconds and think about, you know, is this really a danger? Of course not. Then why is the media telling us it is? You'll see that it is completely phony.
You used to be a university professor, and then you had trouble being rehired because of your beliefs. A similar story is happening with Van Jones. What are your comments on that? What's your take on what's going on?
Well, I wish Van Jones had done what I did. When they came after me, I just gave it right back to them and spoke the truth. I'm sure Van Jones realizes full well that the official story of 9/11 is hogwash. So why won't he just say it? I guess he has more to lose than I had, but you know, I was right at the beginning of an academic career, and I've put my academic career on hold. I can't get hired anywhere now. Had Van Jones had the guts to stand by his guns and say, yes, I'm proud that I signed that petition and we still don't have the truth about 9/11, he would have used his moment in the limelight in a much more productive way. So I'm disappointed that he backed off, and I hope he'll change his mind on that at some point.
Could it be that people who speculate about the events of 9/11, in a sense, are just basically trying to get publicity and not really investigate and look into the issue?
Well, no, I don't think that's true. I think we are trying to get publicity, and the reason for that is that all of the volumes and volumes of information that contradict the official story have been blacked out from the U.S. mainstream media. So then we say, well, how can we manage to get some of this information into the mainstream media? To do that, we have to come up with publicity ideas, publicity stunts sometimes, if you will. But we're not doing this just to get publicity. Why would I want this kind of publicity? You know, why would I want O'Reilly giving me death threats and being drummed out of academia. I can't get a job. I'm about to file for bankruptcy. This kind of publicity isn't really doing me personally any good at all. But if I don't do it, I couldn't live with myself.
So would you say because of your beliefs, your life has been affected in a negative way?
Overall, I wouldn't change anything if I could do it again. 9/11 Truth Movement people, by and large, are some of the best people you'll ever meet. They're people with courage. They're people with unusually high intelligence. And if they end up throwing us in FEMA camps, at least I'll be on the side of the barbed wire with the interesting people, the kind of people that I would like to talk to and be friends with.
Why do people from the Truth Movement keep getting called psychotic and all other names for what they believe?
Well, that's because they don't have any evidence to try to disprove what we say. So rather than arguing the evidence with us, they have to attack the messenger. And then they say, you're crazy. What kind of argument is that?
Kevin Barrett, thank you for your time with us today.
Thank you so much, Anastasia.